we begin, let's go over the primary learning objectives that we'll be covering during today's lesson. We'll start from square one by either creating an EndNote online account from scratch, or I'll show you where you can log into an existing EndNote online account if by chance you've created one in the past that you would like to continue to use. I'd like to highlight some of the benefits that you receive by linking both your EndNote online account and a Web of Science account if you happen to have access to that service. Not everyone has access to Web of Science. You have to be affiliated with an institution that subscribes to the Web of Science. But when you have access to both the Web of Science and EndNote online, there's some additional functionality that you'll benefit from in both sides of the platform. This linking of the two accounts used to be an optional step, but in a Clarivate-wide effort to sort of streamline the login process for our various products, this now actually takes place automatically, again, if you have access to both services. So I'll like to point out some of those benefits. Once we're logged into EndNote Online, we'll sort of undergo a review of the My References tab in the EndNote Online interface. That's the primary screen in the EndNote Online platform, where you'll be, managing your references and file attachments, reviewing the items that you've stored in your library, and potentially modifying them further if you'd like to add or remove any additional metadata. I'll show you how you can manually add a reference in EndNote Online, something you might not need to do very often, but there are certain types of materials that you just might not be able to find online, or maybe you can find the resource online, but perhaps the site doesn't have an EndNote Online direct export option. So again, there are times where creating a reference by hand may be required, and again, nice to know how to do it just in case. I'll show you how you can configure a feature available in EndNote Online called Online Search, which allows EndNote to connect to various remote databases that support a particular data protocol called Z39.50. It's a protocol first developed, I believe, either in the late 70s or early 80s, intended for bibliographic databases, and is still quite popular for those types of databases. So I'll show you how directly from the EndNote Online interface you can connect to one of these remote databases to search for references and add them directly to your library quickly. Once we've performed an online search, I'll show you how you can perform what we call a direct export from other websites that have implemented this functionality. Not every site out there supports direct exporting to EndNote Online. I'd say more sites support direct exporting to EndNote Desktop. But today I'll show you an example of direct exporting search results from an example Web of Science search that we'll be performing. I'd also like to, in our lesson today, also show you another Clarivate service formerly known as Copernio, now rebranded as EndNote Click, part of the EndNote ecosystem. It's an optional browser extension that's compatible with most of the mainstream web browsers that can help you find, full text articles available to you, the best quality full text article available to you, whether it be an open access publication or something that you've got access to for free through institutional affiliation. So you can almost think of what you can capture via EndNote Click as sort of like a supercharged direct export, because not only when you export references from EndNote Click, not only will you receive that metadata in your EndNote Online library, but you would also receive the file attachment for each one of those references at the same time. That's something that doesn't happen automatically with the typical direct export workflow. So I'd like to show again an example of EndNote Click in action, which can be a great time saver. And then, once we start adding some references to our EndNote Online library, I'll show you, some of the best practices for managing, literature or reference materials in your EndNote Online library, and show you how you can add an extra level of organization to your library by creating what we call library groups. In EndNote Online, you sort of have an overarching display of everything stored in your library called All My References, but for particular projects or perhaps focus areas in your field of study, you can make individual groups which almost act as folders in your library, so that at any point, if you wanted to filter out everything but the items in that particular group or that folder, you can click on a group name, and EndNote again will hide everything else and just focus on those particular items that you've associated with any individual group. After that, we'll talk a little bit about how you can, collaborate with other EndNote online users by sharing groups with other EndNote online users, and by doing so, you can collaborate with colleagues or teammates on various projects to prepare or gather your research materials, and then you all can actually cite from that shared group once it's been shared with your colleagues, which helps to increase your formatting consistency because everyone's drawing from the same set of references. So sharing groups is optional, but again, very handy, and I'd like to show you how to do it today just in case. At this point of the lesson plan, we'll switch gears. We'll talk a little bit about EndNote's file attachment capabilities. In EndNote Online, you can attach up to 45 files per entry in your EndNote library. Typically, researchers are attaching full-text PDF articles, but you might also have an additional data set and an Excel workbook, or you might have some research notes that you've prepared in a Word document, and you can really attach, again, almost any type of file to an EndNote library record. So I'll show you how you can manually attach a file, actually up to 5 files at a time in EndNote Online very quickly. And then we'll close out with a brief overview of the EndNote add-in for Microsoft Word, which we call the Cite While You Write commands, or the Cite While You Write tools. A lot of power related to this add-in for Word. The desktop version of EndNote has more bells and whistles, but EndNote Online can get a basic research paper done for you as well. And I'd like to show you some of the daily driver features, I like to call them, to insert citations, the appropriate method to remove a citation if the need arises for you, and how you can also modify individual citations if you need to do things like suppress an author surname in a particular instance, or perhaps add cited page information if required by your formatting guidelines. And then in addition to that, I'd like to show you how you can quickly change output styles in a research project that you're developing in Microsoft Word, which is really handy if you're still in the process of determining where you might attempt to submit a research project to for publication. You can quickly apply the formatting guidelines for Journal A by selecting its output style in Microsoft Word. And then once you've either printed that out or maybe submitted that digitally, excuse me, you can turn around and then reformat with Style B just by selecting it on a drop-down menu in Microsoft Word. With that said, pretty much everything else we'll be looking at today will be in the platform itself. So I'm going to go ahead and close out of our agenda slides here, minimize our PowerPoint deck, and you'll see that I've already got Mozilla Firefox up and running. And I want to show you a couple of ways that you can quickly access the EndNote Online website. I'd probably say that the easiest method would be to start by visiting the EndNote homepage at endnote.com, where you'll see at the top of the page here, there's a link that says EndNote Online Login. You can click on that, and of course, that'll take you to the login page. However, you can also navigate directly to My EndNote Web. It's all one word. MyEndNoteWeb.com will also take you directly to this login page. Now, this is a redirect URL. If I actually go ahead and press enter now, you'll see that it reloads the page with a sort of a longer, a little bit more of a complex, or actually it looks like it's already logging me in here. Oh no, perfect, okay. This is what I was expecting to see. It's a little bit of a longer URL. I don't recommend remembering or trying to memorize this particular web address. You could bookmark it if you'd like, but if you simply navigate to myendnoteweb.com, again, it'll take you to the same page. Almost anyone in the world could make a free EndNote Online account, what we would call a basic account, you pretty much, again, can get a pretty basic research paper done with an EndNote Basic account. You can store up to 50,000 references in your EndNote Basic library. You can store up to 2 gigabytes worth of file attachments in your library as well. And then you have access to 21 of our most popular output styles. But I'll mention in just a moment that by having access to Web of Science or EndNote Desktop, you get some additional functionality in your EndNote Online account. So again, almost anyone in the world can click on register to create a free account. When you create your account, you do have the ability to link your EndNote Online account to either Facebook or LinkedIn to streamline the sign-in process from the a web browser. But I did just want to reiterate that as you create your account, you will still have a separate email address and password associated with your EndNote Online account that you would need to input in EndNote Desktop or Microsoft Word. EndNote Desktop and Word will not recognize your Facebook or LinkedIn credentials. That's simply for signing in from a web browser. So again, this is really handy, but just be sure to jot down, or if you can, memorize the underlying email address and password also associated with your account, because again, you'll need to enter those credentials if you're working with Cite in Word, or if you also have access to EndNote Desktop, which we're up to EndNote 20 at this time. So, of course, I've already got an account. I'm not actually going to walk through the registration process, but it's pretty straightforward. I'm simply going to go ahead and input my stored credentials here, and we're just going to go ahead and sign in. And, of course, this is what you would do as well once you've performed that initial step of creating an account. I'll go ahead and click Sign In now. And once we're signed in here, it's just going to take a moment. Perfect. You might, when you first get started, you might actually see what we call the Getting Started screen, which has some links to some various, pages in the platform, and also to some help files that or help pages that also exist for EndNote Online. You can hide this at any point on the right side of the My References screen that we're on. You can click Hide Getting Started Guide, and of course you can reveal that again quickly. And before we tour sort of the rest of the My References screen or interface that we see here, I just wanted to point out, I had mentioned that if you have access to EndNote Online and the Web of Science through your institution, your school or your employer perhaps, you'll have some additional functionality. So we can see here that my EndNote Online account already has 10 references in it, and these 10 references I happen to capture via a Web of Science search. And we can see that below each of these entries in my EndNote Online library, we see some additional links that you wouldn't see if you did not have access to the Web of Science. At any point, we can quickly return to the source record. This would be this specific piece of literature that's indexed in the Web of Science. We can expand our search in the Web of Science and view related records, which would be other references indexed in the Web of Science that have at least one citation in common. It's a really novel way to, stumble across research that you may not have found otherwise. It's one of the benefits of, again, having access to the Web of Science. You'll also see dynamic time-cited information that's populated by, data that's indexed by the Web of Science, which gives you, an idea of how, influential a particular piece of literature is, perhaps in your field of study, really handy. And then to quickly just show you here, I'm not certified to train in the Web of Science myself, but I did want to quickly just show you here that, one of the benefits of, creating a Web of Science account is that you can create email alerts for various searches that you might need to perform periodically. But in terms of EndNote Online benefits, when you perform a Web of Science search, if one of your search results happens to already exist in your EndNote Online library, there will be a little icon here signifying this little purple square with the white EN lettering. That's letting us know that these items are already in our EndNote Online library. Should be just the first 10 here, and if I continue to scroll down, yes, so we see starting at reference 11, these items are not yet in our library. So again, helps us refrain from creating unnecessary duplicates. That EndNote Online does have a find duplicates feature, but it's probably a better idea to try to avoid creating duplicates in the first place. I'm going to go ahead and close out of our example search, Web of Science search here, just to get back to EndNote Online. And then just to quickly, tour the My References screen that we're on, we're seeing toward the middle of the page individual entries that are indexed in our EndNote or stored in our EndNote Online library. We see the author, year, title information displayed directly on this interface. We can quickly resort by any one of these display columns if we wanted to, just by clicking on the column label. You see here I've just sorted by year. I think we're going, descending. I can reverse that with any of these display columns as well by just clicking the label once more. There are some additional sorting options here on the sort by drop-down, a little bit more complex options that you can apply just by clicking on a column label that we see here on the page. So I did want to point that out. I'm going to go ahead and resort by author here. Perfect. You do have the ability, as we see, we're showing currently 50 references per page. When you get started, I believe it's just 10 references per page, but you can change that at any point at either 10, 25, or 50 references per page. We see also, I did want to point out that, if you click the title of any one of these references stored in your library, you can actually be taken to the individual reference screen where you can review all of the reference metadata that's stored in that particular entry, and you could make additional changes. You can fix a typo, you can add a piece of information, you can delete some information, you can add a file attachment, we'll talk about in just a little bit. At any point, we can click on Return to List. We're back here on the My References screen. On the left side of the screen, we're looking at the side panel, or you might call it the Groups panel, where again, we have an entry called, or a default group called All My References. Of course, that's going to show you every single entry stored in your EndNote online library. We see that there's another default group called Unfiled. That name might sound a little bit ominous, but basically that's just letting you know that if you choose to group your references so that each entry in your library is associated with a group for a particular project or focus area, Unfiled would let you know if you've missed any. And I like to try to treat the unfiled group as my library's inbox. I try to keep the count down to 0 as much as possible, because doing so helps to make grouping references that much easier. If you take that approach, normally anything that's currently unfiled is related to a particular search or topic. You can usually select all those items and associate them with a particular group. Whereas if you don't take that approach, you might gather references for topic A, you might then gather some references for topic B. At that point, they would both sets of references would become intermingled under unfiled. And it wouldn't make it impossible to group them. It just adds an extra level of complexity to the grouping process. Quick list is just sort of a favorites group, if you can think of it as that. If you choose not to make separate custom groups of your own, maybe you just need one group for sort of general purpose, quick access. You can mark any items shown on any one of the displays, whether it be All My References or an individual group, and you can copy the items to the quick list as well. Of course, you can delete an item here as well. And then, again, we're going to be talking about this a little bit later, but if you create, I skipped over the trash. I think that's probably pretty self-explanatory. If you choose to remove a reference from your library, it'll live in the trash until you choose to empty the trash, and you can always restore references from the trash if the need arises for you. Under My Groups, if we create custom groups in our library, that's where those appear, where those items will appear. We'll be performing that action in just a moment. And again, we will be talking about shared groups in just a little bit as well. But if someone else, another EndNote online user, is sharing the group with you, it's going to show up in the side panel under Group Shared by Others. So with that said, I want to go ahead and show you how to manually add a reference to your library just in case. So, perhaps a good example of this is if you want to cite an individual web page, perhaps. Usually an individual web page probably won't have an EndNote online export option, and so that might be an instance where you need to add that manually so that you can cite that in a research project. To do so in EndNote Online, you would just point your mouse over the Collect tab, where you see some submenu items here. Pretty much all of the tabs function in that manner, except for Match, as you see. But under Collect, what we can do is click on New Reference. I'll go ahead and click that now. And by the way, I'm on, of course, you might notice I'm on Microsoft Windows today. This is something, a service you can use on Mac OS as well. If there are any differences between the two platforms, I'll be sure to point those differences out as we work through the lesson plan today. But pretty much feature parity on both platforms, because again, primarily you're just interacting with a web page, and it's more or less going to be the same on both platforms. But we see here, now that we've clicked New Reference, we're on the New Reference screen where we see, a blank slate for a new entry in our EndNote online library. The first thing I would recommend configuring is your reference type. We have dozens of different reference types for various fields of study. With EndNote Desktop, which is currently EndNote 20, you can actually modify reference types and create new reference types of your own. That's a feature not available in EndNote Online, even if you have an enhanced account. But again, the reason why I recommend configuring this first is that some of the field labels may change to more appropriate labels for the type of material that you'll be storing. Instead of a web page, actually, let's go ahead and use a newspaper article, because I think this will highlight some of these field label differences a little bit better. Right now, we're just looking at the generic reference type field names on the left side of the screen. But if we go and change it, if I go and let's say select newspaper article, we see that what had been called the author field is now referred to as reporter. What had been, I believe, the secondary title field is now called newspaper. So a little bit more of an appropriate label for the type of information we would store for this, type of research material. Now, with EndNote Desktop, you have a little bit more flexibility with regard to how you're manually inputting author names or editor names in your EndNote library. With EndNote Online, you must use the last name, comma, first name format, and you want to make sure that each name is on its own line if you have multiple authors, so that EndNote is able to tell where one name ends and the next name begins. So I'm just going to put in a couple of generic names here. We've got John, an example researcher, John Smith. We put in Smith, comma, John. I'll go ahead and input another author here. We'll just use Robert Jones, perhaps, just as placeholders. And I did want to point out that, if you were to, include a reference, for a, sort of a piece of literature or report that's not coming from, an individual person or an individual researcher, let's say, maybe it's published by an institution or a government body or some other organization, you would need to input the name in a particular format to let EndNote know that it's not like a complex person's name. So what you would want to do, let's say we wanted to input a reference coming from the FDA. We would actually want to input the name exactly how we would want to output it in our formatted bibliography here, but we would put actually a trailing comma at the end of the name. That trailing comma won't carry over into our formatted reference, but it's a note to EndNote to let the program know or the service know that this is not a person's name, and not to try to parse it out like it might try to do for a person as it's formatting that name in an in-text citation or a reference in a bibliography. And you might notice that when you click into one field and then into the next, the changes are saved automatically. We'll go ahead and click next into the title field here. Manual data entry is a little bit easier in EndNote Desktop because you can just tab through the fields instead of having to click from one field to another, but not too difficult here. I'm just going to put in a couple of other pieces of information. You can always come back to the screen and add additional details if necessary, and I think these scant details are enough for our example here. So we see that the change is saved automatically. We can click the save button at any point as well if we'd like to do so, but whenever we're done, we can go back to our either all my references at this point, where we would see this new item that would be part of the all my references list. We see, of course, it's considered unfiled as well. We now also have 11 unfiled references, and again, that's because it's not yet part of a custom group. So I think, before we move on here, it might not be a bad idea to make a group out of these references before we start capturing other materials that might be related to, different topics. So, if we want to go ahead, and I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but I think it would make a little bit more sense for us here. So if we want to add these references to a group, we can quickly do that. We can either check the all box. That would be every single entry shown, in the library, or, if we had, more than 50 references and we just wanted to mark a particular page of references, whether it be 10, 25, or 50 at a time, we could also mark page. So since we only have 11 references and we want to include all of them, it really doesn't matter at this point which of the two items we select here. And then what we can do, one of the options to quickly create a group is we can click the Add to Group drop-down. If we had an existing group we wanted to add these items to, it would be listed here. If we had read and write access to a shared group, we can add them references to a shared group as well. But today we're just going to create a new group by clicking that item on this drop-down. I'm just going to give it an overarching name called Online References, sort of a catch-all for these particular resources here. I'll go ahead and press OK. All right, perfect. So we still have 11 references associated with the All My References catch-all group, but we see we now have no unfiled references because every single item currently in this library is associated with a custom group, currently a group called Online References. Now that we've gone over, manually adding a reference and creating a group quickly from the My References screen, I want to show you how you can connect to a remote database via EndNote Online to look for additional materials to quickly add to your library. So to do that, you would point your mouse over Collect once more, where we had been previously for new reference, but this time we're going to go and select online search. And, there, like I mentioned, this feature, requires that the remote database supports a particular database protocol called Z39.50. Not every database that you can query via a web browser supports that protocol. Just as an example, Google Scholar is a great free resource, but they don't support Z39.50, so you wouldn't be able to connect to a database like Google Scholar via online search. Now, you'll notice, and again, depending on your level of account enhancement, you will see a differing number of items on this list of connection files. Like I mentioned, EndNote Basic has a very select set of content files available. If you have linked your EndNote Online account to Web of Science, you'll have the same number of items that you see here that I have listed here as well. Same goes that if you link your EndNote desktop license to your EndNote Online account, not only will you have additional storage space in EndNote Online, but you'll have access to additional content files as well. A lot of these are digitized card catalogs at different schools around the world that are free to search. There are some nationally and federally funded databases listed here as well. There are subscription databases that require a username and password assigned by the information provider to connect to those resources. So not every single entry on this list is free to query. Now, you might notice that quite a number of items here. It may be a pretty unruly list to try to scroll through this, frequently. So you might want to go ahead and configure favorite connections so that you have a short list of items to choose from. I'm going to go ahead and click Select Favorites here, where we get a similar table of all of the different items that were on this drop-down. I'm going to go and just add a couple of federally funded databases listed here in the United States. Library of Congress is really the quintessential free books database. If you're looking for a book reference, a good chance that it'll be indexed by the Library of Congress. I'm also going to add the PubMed database hosted by the National Library of Medicine, another federally funded resource, sort of the premier free biomedical research database, and this will be the connection file that we use for our example today. So I'll highlight that item as well. I'll click Copy to Favorites. I can always come back to the screen and I can configure up to 25 favorite connections at any given point. Now that I'm done for now, I'm going to go and press Hide to, of course, hide that table. And if we return to the Select dropdown, we see we have a much more manageable list of resources, that we might expect ourselves to query, frequently. So I'm going to go and choose PubMed here to, begin the connection process, and then I'll actually now press Connect to establish a connection. And, querying these remote databases via online search in EndNote Online can be easier to do than via EndNote Desktop if you're doing so from a school or your employer's an employer workstation. That's because these remote databases are configured to communicate over a particular network port. And for a lot of institutions, aside from the ports required for standard internet searching or internet traffic, a lot of institutions will close these ports to ensure they don't have like an additional weak link in their network security. So you might find, typically PubMed communicates over a port that's open for standard internet traffic, but Library of Congress, the port it uses may actually be closed at your institution. And if you run into that issue, so long as you've created a free EndNote Online account, you can actually perform that same search from EndNote Online. And instead of being beholden to, network policies and restrictions for your local network, this search is taking place via our EndNote Online servers. And so again, closed ports would usually not be an issue when performing an online search via EndNote Online. You see that we've already established a connection. We've got a simple search screen where we can configure up to 4 different search parameters. Before we configure a search term, I just wanted to point out, you've got a list of fields that you can search by. Now, this list of fields isn't chosen by EndNote or EndNote Online. The remote database administrator will choose which fields are queryable for their Z39.50 compliant database. And I did want to point out that this list of fields can vary from database to database. For instance, PMID, that's a unique PubMed identifier. If we were querying the Library of Congress, let's say, I don't believe they index that particular field. So again, if we were connecting to Library of Congress instead, we would see different items on this list. If we were going to be performing a multi-parameter search, we can configure the appropriate Boolean operator, sometimes referred to as field connector, to let EndNote know, or EndNote and the remote database know how to link two or more search parameters together in that search, and depending on whether you want to narrow or broaden the scope of the search would dictate which operator you select. We're just going to perform a real simple search here for the term asthma, just for our example today. So I've got that search term entered here. We could input a phrase as well if it's a multi-word term or keyword, let's say, but I believe this is enough for our example today. So I'm going to go ahead and initiate the search by pressing the search button. And we'll see that we start retrieving, if there are any references that fall under the scope of that search that we've crafted, we'll start retrieving search results. And we see that they're streaming in here. None of these items are yet in our EndNote online library. This online search results screen that we're on is a temporary display where EndNote is sort of gathering these search results for consideration and potential copying to our library. Now, I did want to point out the broad search that we've just performed is probably going to return quite a few results. So at any point, if you wanted to pause this retrieval action, you can go and click that pause button here. You can start it up again at any point by clicking play again. We don't need 548 references for our example, so I'm going to go and just leave this paused. And we can review the items that are listed here. We can read the author information, year, and title details. If we are a user with a Web of Science access in our institution has configured an open URL server and let our entitlements team, Clarivate's entitlements team, know about that, you would see a link to that resource as well. We do see a link to just the general URL for this reference. If we wanted to look at the underlying details for a particular entry, again, we can click the title of any one of those individual entries here. We're taken to what we call the View Online Search reference page. Looks very similar to the screen you would be looking at for an entry already stored in your library. But again, this resource is not yet in our library. And we wouldn't want to make any changes here, of course. This is just a temporary item, but we can review the details that are present here just to help us sort of inform our decision whether or not it's an item that we want to capture. If it is, what we could do directly from this individual screen is click that same Add to Group drop-down, where we can, add this to an existing group or a shared group as well if we have one, or we can create a new group if this is for a new topic or new project for our library. Since this pertains to a different topic, I believe the other search examples are pertaining to the topic of COVID, and these are related to asthma. I'm going to go ahead and click on New Group once more. We're going to go ahead and just call this, I think today we'll be using asthma as our example, our search example, and we'll be gathering, a number of items for this project to review, consider and review. So I'm going to call this group asthma in general, just to reflect the fact that that's the purpose of this group. Now that we've got the name set, we can click OK. It'll take a moment to refresh the page. Perfect. We see here under our My Groups header, we have asthma in general showing that one reference. It's not considered unfiled. It's in all my references as well, but we bypassed unfiled by just associating that reference with this new group automatically. If we were to click this group name, we would lose our place in our online search, and we're not done capturing references there. So without losing our place, to get back to that search results screen, we want to click Return to List. I'm going to go ahead and press that now. And we see we're just taken right back to that same screen. We see those same items that are present here on the the list of search results. Let's say we're showing all 50, the maximum display at any one time. Let's go ahead and let's copy all of these 50 items to our asthma in general group so that we have them for to consider and review even once we leave this search. So again, we can since we just want this first page, we wouldn't mark all. We would want to go ahead and mark page here, and again, that's going to be the first 50. Now you might notice on the online search results screen there's a copied column. This first item is showing a check or a tick mark letting us know we've already captured this item. And to help us avoid creating a duplicate, I'm now going to uncheck it because, again, we've already captured it in our EndNote online library. Once we're ready, we can click the Add to Group drop-down again. And because this group already exists, instead of choosing New Group, this time we'll just click on the name of the destination group, Asthma in General. I'll go ahead and do that now. And it's take a little bit longer just because more items. Perfect. It just finished as it was speaking. Now we see we have 50 references in our ASMA General group. We can continue, reviewing our search results. We can go back and craft a different search, refine it if we'd like. But I think we're done for our online search example. It's a pretty similar process for any database you're connecting with. Well, let's next go ahead and click on this new custom group that we've just created called ASMA General. You'll see that when we choose to do so, even though this library has 61 references in it currently, EndNote is only showing the items that are associated with this particular group in our EndNote library, a focused method of just reviewing the materials that you might have gathered for a particular project or, again, focus area in your field of study. And if we wanted to, we can click, the title of any one of these entries here to modify or view or modify the underlying details further. And, at any point we could, remove items from a group. If we mark, let's say, just these first two items, we can click Remove to Group, which won't take them out of our library. It would essentially just remove them from this particular group, and if these references aren't part of any other group in our library, they would become unfiled. But if we did want to not only remove these from the group, but also delete them and send them to the trash, we can click on Delete here. And again, that'll bypass unfiled. It'll take these items out of all my references. And actually, I'm going to go and do that here just to show you. If we delete these two items, we see that they become part of the trash. When you have references in the trash, you can empty the trash at any point. But if there's any concern that these might be resources that you may wish to restore in the future, you can leave them in the trash. If you click on the trash heading here, we see the different references. They're sort of showed them in a striped view just to help differentiate the different, the various items in this group. And I did just want to point out, at any point, if you wanted to restore something from the trash, you can mark an individual item, all items, or a particular page, and you can add them back to a group or send them back to be unfiled if you'd like. It's your choice. All right, so again, online search is really handy. It's nice to be able to stay in EndNote while you're connecting with a remote database to perform a search. But, direct export is also a pretty handy resource. And it's a little bit handier, I'd say, if you have access to EndNote Desktop as well, because a lot of sites have configured or implemented a direct export option for EndNote Desktop. Not too many sites have configured a direct export option for EndNote Online, but the Web of Science is one of the resources, one of the scholarly databases, that does have an EndNote online export option. So I'd like to use that as our example today for direct export. I'm just going to navigate to webofscience.com, and we might need to refresh the page because I had previously performed a search, but let's see what it shows us here. Perfect. All right, we're taken directly to the search screen, which I was expecting to see. And here we can perform, very complex searches for references indexed by the Web of Science. We're currently querying the core collection with a series of databases you can see listed here. There are also, individual databases you can query, or all databases as well. But we're going to go ahead and leave the default selection of core collection marked here under search in. We've got different fields that we can search by. Again, every information provider really chooses which fields are queryable for their databases. I'm going to go and leave the default selection chosen topic, which will search a series of fields: title, abstract, author keywords, and keywords plus at the same time. We're going to go and stick with that topic of asthma, but I think I'll go ahead and add a row here so that we can include a secondary search parameter. We've got those same Boolean operators, and because I want to narrow the scope of my search by limiting my results to a particular year, I'm going to leave "and" selected. And on the second field drop-down, I'm going to be choosing year published. Here I can define a date range, a year range, or I can input an individual year. I think I'll go ahead and just input 2021 here for our example. Go ahead and press search to initiate that search. We see that Web of Science comes back pretty much instantaneously to let us know that within the Web of Science core collection, there are 10,362 items that match or fit the scope of this search. And, we can export in the new Web of Science, we can export up to 500 references at a time to EndNote Online. If you also work with EndNote Desktop, the new Web of Science supports exporting up to 1,000 references directly to EndNote Desktop, but currently we're limited to up to 500 references per time via EndNote Online export. Now, if you didn't want a range of references, you wanted to export specific items, you can simply mark them here on the list of search results, and just those marked items would be sent to your library. But if you want a range of up to 500 at a time, you could mark no search results. You can proceed by clicking Export. You can then choose the various destinations, but we're focusing on EndNote Online today, so we'll be choosing that as our destination. And then because we hadn't marked specific search results, this is where we can define our range of records for up to 500 per time. And I did just want to point out, it would be a series of exports we would need to perform, but if we did want this complete range of 10,000 references, we could export, 500 at a time. So right now, we don't even need 500. I think we'll stick with the first 50. But let's pretend we wanted the first 500. We would proceed with this configured as such. We would then come back to the screen and then ask for 500 through 1,000 and just continue on, and we'd be able, if we wanted to, gather that complete range in our EndNote Online library. But again, let's stick with just 50, but maybe we'll ask for the second set of 50. We'll ask for 51 through 100. Now, certain information providers give you control over how much reference information gets sent to your EndNote library. The Web of Science is one of them. And because we're searching from the Web of Science core collection, we've got a couple of additional items on this record content list. I'm going to select full record today because that's not only going to give us the author, title, source, and abstract, but we'll also receive the author's address and the keywords for each one of these references. So a little bit more of a fleshed out entry in our library once it's created. Now that everything is configured as desired, we'll go ahead and click on Export here. And we'll see that this is sort of handled behind the scenes. When you're direct exporting to EndNote Desktop, there's actually a temporary internet file that gets generated, and you have to tell your web browser how to handle that file. But the connection between the Web of Science and EndNote Online just sort of takes place behind the scenes automatically. We see that the export configuration window has gone away. I'm going to leave this page up, but we should be able to return to our EndNote Online library. And here in EndNote Online, since this page was already displaying, we need to reload it to show the changes. So I'm going to go ahead and click the reload icon here at the top of the browser window. And we should see, perfect, if it was successful, which it was, we see the all my references count has grown to now 109 references. We see we now have, again, 50 unfiled references. These are the 50 we just exported from the Web of Science. They're not yet part of a custom group, of course. That's why they're shown here under unfiled. And before we move on, I'm just going to go ahead and mark all 50 in this particular unfiled group. And since these items pertain to the example research project we're preparing here in our lesson today on the topic of asthma, on the Add to Group drop-down, we'll just go ahead and choose that same group once more. But again, we could make a new group if this was for a different project or a different focus area. I'll click Asthma in General, and we'll see it just takes a moment to mark these as filed. They're no longer unfiled, as we see here, and we now see that Asthma in General has grown as well. So that's again a great time saver to be able to direct export from an online database like the Web of Science to your EndNote Online library. Now, I had mentioned there's that optional browser extension called EndNote Click, which will give you more compatibility on various scholarly databases, on various information providers' websites. I'm going to leave Mozilla Firefox open for a moment, but I'm going to bring up my Google Chrome instance here quickly. I've navigated directly to the EndNote Click homepage, which we see here is just click.endnote.com. That'll take you right here to the homepage. This browser extension is compatible, like I was mentioning, with most of the mainstream browsers. Currently, the one, I'd say, mainstream browser that it's not yet compatible with is Apple Safari. But if you wanted to load this optional extension in Google Chrome, Mozilla Firefox, Any other Chromium-based browser, like Microsoft Edge browser is Chromium-based now. This extension would work in Edge. And there's also an add-on for the Opera browser that would allows Chromium-based extensions to work in Opera. And with that installed, you would also be able to install the EndNote Click extension. Now, I've already got this set up. I don't need to click Add to Chrome, but if you were getting started from scratch, you would. You create a free EndNote Click account. At some point, and now that EndNote Click is part of the EndNote ecosystem, we may be merging EndNote Click accounts with EndNote Online accounts, but at this point, they are two separate accounts. You can use the same credentials for both, but I just wanted to point out they're two separate accounts. And when you have an active browser extension, usually you have a little icon for it near the top right of your browser window. And for EndNote Click, you could do a quick search here of several different databases. You can access your locker, which is a separate holding space for PDFs that you've gathered through your web searching. You can configure settings like your email address, your institutional affiliation, things like that. All that's configurable here. I just want to quickly show you, I'm going to close this home page. I've got PubMed.gov up to search, perform another PubMed search quickly. Maybe we'll go ahead and use a different search topic. Maybe I'm a little hungry this afternoon. Maybe we'll go ahead and search for chocolate here. We'll go ahead and just press search to initiate that search quickly. We could craft a more complex search if necessary. But what we see, PubMed.gov is an example of one of the 20,000 scholarly sites that EndNote Click is compatible with that allows us to inject or implement a download option for a PDF directly on the search results page. So if you did not have EndNote Click installed and you visited PubMed.gov, you would not see this View PDF button. This is EndNote Click in action. And again, EndNote Click will help you find open access publications. But if you hit a paywall and you've associated a particular institution with your EndNote Click account, what EndNote Click will do is sort of take you to your institution's login page so that you can use your institutional credentials or your institutional affiliation to access what would normally be a paid resource, but something that you have access to for free. Now, I just wanted to point out, Clarivate does not receive your institutional credentials. They're stored encrypted in the browser, just like any other set of encrypted credentials in your browser, but EndNote Click would utilize those whenever it hit a paywall to see if that would be a resource that you should have access to through your institutional affiliation. If you point your mouse over View PDF, you can see which version is available or whether or not it's already in your EndNote Click locker. I'm going to go ahead, just as an example, I'm going to go ahead and click on View PDF for this particular article here. We see that what happens is that the article is now displayed on a new tab. It's stored in our EndNote Click locker, which is, again, a temporary holding space. You can use EndNote Click without EndNote if you prefer a different bibliographic management software package. You can export PDFs and references to RefWorks or Mendeley or Zotero. You can also export directly to EndNote Desktop as well. But again, this is just sort of a holding space for your literature. But if you configure in your EndNote Click settings, if you configure your EndNote Online account, you link the two through your settings, you'll have in the sidebar an option to push the reference to EndNote Web, which is sort of another name we have for EndNote Online. So we see here that I've already got that configured just to save time. We see a list of our groups in the EndNote Online library we're using in our lesson plan today. And since this doesn't really fit into the scope of, I guess you can consider it an online reference, but let's say that this is for a new project that we might be getting started with. Let's go and just add this to the unfiled group initially, and we can now go ahead and push that to EndNote Web. And it just takes a moment to complete. We see the check sort of indicates it's finished. If we go back just quickly here to Mozilla Firefox, we can refresh this or reload this page once more. We'll see that we have the new unfiled reference. And if we just go ahead and just let this finish loading here just for a moment. I think our VPN traffic is a little bit slow today. But okay, perfect. So let's go ahead and click unfiled. All right. So the benefit here is that not only did we get the reference information, which is something we can get either by manually creating a reference, performing an online search, or direct exporting from a site like the Web of Science. But we also received in our EndNote online library the associated PDF attachment through the same action. We can tell that by this blue paperclip icon. This is something, again, we'll be talking about in just a moment, but what I wanted to do here is show you how if we click on this little blue paperclip, this signifies that this entry in our EndNote online library has at least one file attachment. It doesn't mean it's a PDF. It could be some other type of file. If you link a Microsoft Word document, you can open that and download it and open it if you have Word installed on that particular workstation. If you have an Excel workbook linked to an EndNote library entry, you could download that and open it with Excel if you have it installed. But just to show you here quickly, if I click on just the title of the PDF that was just captured via EndNote Click, we see, of course, we have to download it again. It's on the EndNote online servers. But if we go and either save it or open it, let's just open it with Firefox quickly. We can look at that same PDF on the fly as we go, which is really handy. And just one last item I wanted to show you quickly for EndNote Click is there are certain sites that don't allow us to integrate on their search results page, and a prime example of that is Google Scholar. For whatever reason, it's their service. They have a vision of what they want their page to look like. They don't want us to embed a button like we can do on different sites like PubMed.gov. So if we perform a similar search here, it doesn't mean that, again, that we can't capture references from Google Scholar, but we would have to use the little EndNote Click icon. This is sort of called your smart extension screen. And not only, do we have links to settings and Locker and things like that, but when you're on a site that EndNote Click supports, the search that's displayed on screen will be recreated on this panel that we've just popped up by clicking on that little icon here. So we see that on this first, I think there's only 10 items on this first page. I'm relying on open access published resources. I don't have subscription access, so there's only one PDF on this first page that's available to me. But what I could do here is click this little icon for that particular reference, and then I can either add this, view it, and add this to my EndNote Click Locker. I can download the PDF instead to my hard drive, or if I was working with EndNote Desktop, I can export this reference directly to EndNote Desktop. But we're going to go ahead, since we're focusing on EndNote Online today, we're going to view the selected PDF in EndNote Online. And then once more, if we can use the locker here to review the article if we'd like, but if this is ultimately something we want to capture, we could then once more click the drop down for our appropriate EndNote Online group. We'll go ahead and leave this unfiled since we haven't created a group for this just yet. We'll click push to EndNote Web, and it'll just take a moment to send that over. The final element that I just wanted to quickly touch on here is that smart extension screen can be used to capture multiple references in your locker at the same time as well. So let's, back here on PubMed.gov, even though they do allow us to integrate right on their search results page, this would be just for one reference at a time. But if we wanted, it looks like we have 6 PDFs available on this first page of items. If we wanted to send all of these to our locker for review and capturing, instead, I mean, we could mark individual items here, but we could just say select all available PDFs, and then we can here click view selected PDFs. It does open each item on a separate tab. You can close this if you'd like. But alternately, what we would use is, we would click on each tab one at a time, and then we can push these again to EndNote Web, again, one at a time. So this is a great resource, a new element in the EndNote ecosystem, and I'm sure it'll be integrated even further as time goes on. But I want to go ahead, now that we've covered EndNote Online, just to streamline things. I'm going to close our Chrome browser. We're going to focus on Mozilla Firefox again. And once more, I'm going to reload the page just to reflect the newest items we've captured. And because I like to keep our unfiled count down to 0 as much as possible, once this page loads here, I'm going to go ahead and go to the unfiled group here, display the 3 references that we've just captured pertaining to the topic of chocolate. We'll go ahead and mark the page here, the 3 items. We can click add to group once more, and then on the drop down, we'll select new group again, and this time we'll just call it, maybe just chocolate project. Something, any naming convention is fine, but something related to the purpose of the group usually makes the most sense. So we'll go and click OK here. All right, and so next what I wanted to do here quickly is to show you, before we start perhaps sharing some of our groups, I just wanted to show you how you can quickly check your library for duplicate literature, just to, manage, make sure you're managing the contents of your library, helps to ensure you don't have extraneous literature that might, again, negatively impact your EndNote's formatting capabilities if you cite duplicates in a research project you're developing. So on a periodic basis, if you want to check your library for duplicates, you can point your mouse over Organize here in EndNote Online, and you could then you can then move over to Find Duplicates. Oh, be a little bit more precise here. My trackpad's very finicky. There we go. Click on Find Duplicates. All right, so we currently don't have any duplicated items here. Now, if we wanted to, maybe let's go ahead and let's create a duplicate here quickly. I'm going to go ahead and export one of these references. If we just go ahead and refresh the Web of Science search that we performed, and we go ahead and export again, this time we're just going to ask for, I believe we had exported 51 to 100, so I'm going to go ahead and just do that once more so that we've duplicated those items, and I'm going to go ahead and just leave record content as is. We're initiating the export. Again, it'll just take a moment to complete. And once it's done, we'll be back on the Web of Science search results as we are now. If we return to EndNote Online, I'm going to go back to my references here quickly. We should see that all my references count has grown by 50. Perfect. And we see the 50 unfiled references. I'm going to leave those as is due to time constraints. But now if we go back to Organize, we have the option for Find Duplicates again. We'll click on that once more. Now we should have some duplicates. Good. And so, of course, it's great if you don't see duplicates, but if you do have any, what EndNote is comparing by default in EndNote Online is author, year, title, and reference type. Those details have to be exact matches for EndNote to hit those as or mark those as duplicate materials. With EndNote Desktop, you can actually reconfigure which fields EndNote's using when determining duplicates, and you can perform a subset duplicate search. But in EndNote Online, you're sort of limited to checking for duplicates based on author, year, title, and reference type, and it's a check of your entire library, not a particular group. We see that on the Find Duplicate screen that we're on, EndNote is showing sort of a striped view, and every other item in most cases is checked. EndNote is showing us both the originals and the duplicates for visual comparison purposes. The originals are not marked. Those are the original items that EndNote will keep. Any items that are marked as here are the duplicates that EndNote will be removing if everything looks good. Now, I always recommend scrolling through this list. It's not very common that EndNote will, highlight what we would call a false positive, a duplicate that's not truly a duplicate. But that could happen, if you have various book chapter references in your library. They'll most likely share the same author, year, overarching title, and reference type. It may be the chapter title that differs. And again, that would be an instance where EndNote would potentially mark those for removal, and you might have to come here and deselect some of the items to make sure that they're not removed. You might also find, I don't think that we have any instance here, but you might also find that a marked item set for removal might have a blue paperclip, which means your duplicate has an attachment. And if you see a gray paperclip for the original, that would the gray paperclip signifies no file attachments for an entry. So again, if you've got a duplicate with an attachment, an original without, that might be an instance where you unmark the duplicate so that you retain it and its file attachment, and then you go ahead and you mark the original for removal since it doesn't have a file attachment. But once you've visually sort of scrolled through this list, make sure everything looks good, what you can do here is if you scroll back to the top of the page, you can click the delete button. That's going to send all the duplicate references to the trash, and all of the originals are still present. They're no longer shown on the Find Duplicate screen, but you would be able to find them under all my references here, of course. So that's something you might find yourself wanting to perform on a daily, weekly, or monthly basis, really depending on how often you're populating your library with new literature. Once you know your library is nice and organized and you've created groups for different purposes or different projects or focus areas, if you're collaborating with anyone else, or let's say you have a co-author on a research project, or perhaps you've got a research assistant helping you to prepare a project, or maybe you're in a class and your professor asks that you share with them the references that you wish to include in a project that you're preparing. Those are all instances where you might want to share a custom group with another EndNote Online user. So if you want to set up group sharing, you could point your mouse over Organize. This time we would click on Manage My Groups. This screen is going to show us all of the existing groups that exist already in our EndNote Online library, and it's just displayed here. We get a count of, how many, there's a statistic of the group name, a count of how many references in the group. We have the option to share the group, rename the group, delete the group as well. I did want to point out, if you delete a group, it doesn't remove the references. They would, if those references aren't part of another custom group, they'll become unfiled, but they won't be deleted. It's just the group itself that would be deleted. You could also create a new group here. You couldn't associate any references with the new group from the screen, but if you wanted to create a new group, you can do that here as well. Let's say that my asthma project, I'll be collaborating with my colleague Steve, and we'll be gathering references together and both building the body of text for this research project, and we want to share this group with him. We would want to click Manage Sharing next to the particular group that you'd like to share. We would have to then click Start Sharing this group to actually initiate that process. And then we have the ability to define the different email addresses for the various other EndNote Online users that we want to grant access to this particular shared group. You can share each custom group in your EndNote Online library with up to 1,000 other EndNote Online users. So the only requirement is that the person has created an EndNote Online account and you know the email address that they're using for their account. So I'm simply going to go ahead and define my colleague Steve's email address here. If I had multiple sharees I wanted to add all at once, I can do so by pressing Enter or Return on your keyboard to make sure that you're entering one name per line. I'll go ahead and maybe just invite my colleague Tony as well, just in case, to mimic more than one attendee sharee. If we had maybe, like I was mentioning, hundreds of different email addresses that we want to add all at once, and we've got a text file where all of those email addresses exist, so long as they're separated by commas, we could browse to that text file and upload those addresses quickly. And we can also assign varying levels of access rights to each EndNote Online group sharee. Now, if you input more than one sharee at once, they'll initially all have the same level of access rights, but you can configure group access on a person-by-person basis. So let's go ahead and we'll leave a read-only set for both Steve and Tony. We'll go ahead and click Apply to start sharing that group. We've got their 2 email addresses added. We'll now go ahead and close this window, the pop-up window. We're back here on the the Manage Sharing screen for this particular group. We now see both of our sharees, and if we did want to, if we wanted to at this point, we could, maybe my colleague Steve needs read and write access, and I'd like to give him the ability to make changes to that group. I can give Steve read and write access, and perhaps Tony just needs to have access to the group to be able to search from the group and perhaps cite from the group in a research project. For that, he would only need read-only access, and I can go and just leave both settings as is. We can change this at any point. We can come back here and add more sharees at any point as well. Now, I just wanted to point out this note here that when you're sharing a group of references with other EndNote Online users, they'll be able to see all the reference metadata, but they will not see your file attachments. That's something that for a group sharee, only the owner of the group will be able to see. If you need to share in a manner with other EndNote users, which would include file attachments automatically, that's when you would want to use library sharing from EndNote Desktop, because library sharing includes all elements of your library, all groups, all references, and all file attachments. Now, this is what it looks like as the sharer of a particular group. Just to show you the flip side of the coin, if we go back to my references, if someone shares a group with you, and in this instance, I've just shared this example group with Steve and Tony, when they log into their EndNote Online accounts on the side panel or the groups panel here on my references, under groups shared by others, they would see the name of the group that I've just shared with them. They would see a little count indicating how many references were currently in that group. They would see a little icon. It's a little bit of an abstract icon here, but we see that for my shared group, I'm a sharee on one group currently, I've got an icon of a silhouette of two persons and a pencil, and as the tooltip is indicating, this indicates that I have read and write access, so I can actually make changes to this group. I'm going to go ahead and click on this group here quickly, the REM sleep group. This group currently contains 49 references. They're not in my library. I just have access to this group in someone else's library from my own EndNote online account. But if maybe down the road I might be interested in citing these items in a separate project of my own, I could copy references from a group to my own library. I could mark all, if there are, a number of items. But if I just wanted a particular page of references, I could mark page instead. There are only 49 in this group. I'm showing 50 references. So if I want to add all of these references, I would just mark them here, click add to group, and I can select one of my own library groups. But if you do that, it's sort of a static transfer. If the references in the shared group continue to develop with additional metadata that may be added by other group sharees, the items that I've copied to my own group will not be updated automatically with those additional details. So I did want to point that out. If you're a read and write user in a group, you can click, let me just deselect these items. You can click the title of any one of the entries in the shared group. You would be able to look, same goes for a read-only user. You'd be able to click here, you'd be able to look at the underlying reference information, but only a read and write user, read and write sharee, would be able to click in one of the fields here and make changes. Now, I did want to mention, if perhaps library sharing with EndNote Desktop requires everyone has access to an EndNote Desktop license. Let's say that's not an option for you, but you still wanted to collaborate with other researchers, and you did want to share file attachments. There is a workaround you could use. In this example reference here, what I've done is that we've added under URL a sharing URL that was generated by Dropbox. So again, it's I would say handier to have EndNote manage your file attachments, but again, if you're sharing a group with other EndNote users and you wanted to make sure everyone has access to that literature, maybe full text articles for that literature, you could upload those PDFs to a third-party sync service like Dropbox, Google Drive, or OneDrive. Usually those third-party sync services allow you to generate a sharing URL, and then if you paste that into one of your records within a shared group, usually everyone would be able to access that, and if you click the little arrow next to the URL, you would be able to launch that attachment in that third-party sync service. So I did want to point that out just quickly as an optional workaround. It does add an extra level of complexity to the process, but gives you additional functionality if you need to share file attachments in a shared group. I'm going to go ahead and close these tabs here just to streamline things again, and we'll go ahead and return to my references for a moment. Now, initially, like I mentioned, if you're sharing a group with other EndNote users and you want everyone to be able to cite from the shared group, once you've set up a shared group as a sharer, your group sharees will have to log into their own EndNote online accounts, and to make that shared group searchable by Cite while you write, at least once after the group has been shared with a sharee, that person would log into their own EndNote online account. They would see your shared group here, but then they would point their mouse over Organize and then click Others Groups. Here, they would see a screen showing all of the groups that are currently shared with them. Again, I'm only on a sharee of one group, that's why I have one item, but you could have 50 groups shared with you. And the access column lets you know if you've got read-only access or read and write access. If there are some shared groups that have maybe taken a back burner and you just wanted to declutter your group shared by others listing, you could temporarily uncheck them under show, and they'll still be available to you, but you would need to come back to others groups here to show them once more if you wanted them to display in EndNote online again. It's this item that's deselected by default, but if you wanted to make the contents of that group searchable via Cite while you write, you would have to just check this once. As soon as you've checked this, when you go to insert a citation using Cite while you write in Microsoft Word, the items, matching items from the shared group would come up in your search results. And again, we see the group name, we see the number of references, and we see the owner. If perhaps someone shared a group with you for a project you finished and they haven't stopped sharing with you, you can reach out to them via email and just say, hey, can you, you can still hide it, but if you wanted to remove it from this list altogether, you would just ask the owner to take you off as a group sharee, and then that group would come off this list here. So hope that helps. Now, before we go into Cite, well, you're right, the last thing I wanted to do, we've talked a little bit about file attachments in EndNote online so far. I had described that in your online interface, if you have a reference that has at least one file attachment, you'll see a blue paperclip icon on the My References screen. Items that have no file attachment, they show sort of a gray paperclip. Looks like all 50 on this first page are gray, indicating no file attachment. Just like before, when we looked at the one of the references captured from EndNote Click, which included a file attachment, we can click the paperclip again, even if it's gray. If there are no file attachments, like now, we can click Attach File. And with EndNote Online, both EndNote Desktop and EndNote Online, you can attach up to 45 attachments per entry in your EndNote library. But with EndNote Online, you can attach up to 5 files at a time. So we're going to go and just click Browse next to this first file label here. And we see that this browse window is taking us to downloads. I've got an example PDF here in downloads. It's not the actual article for this particular piece of literature, but it's a good example here. So I'll just highlight it. I'll go ahead and click Open, and we see that its name is designated here. And if we click Upload, the file has to be taken from your hard drive, uploaded to our EndNote online servers. That happens very quickly. And now if we just go ahead and close this here just for a moment, we see that this item now is showing a little blue paperclip. If we click on it, we see the name of the PDF. We can go to any other device, any other workstation or device that has an active internet connection and a web browser to be able to access these resources. Of course, it has to be downloaded again from the EndNote online server. Most operating systems, recent versions of macOS and Windows have built-in PDF viewing capabilities, or your web browsers usually have those capabilities. But again, if you attach a Word document or something like an Excel spreadsheet, you have to have those programs installed on that particular workstation to be able to, you can still download the file, but to view it, you would have to have the associated application to be able to view it. And I did just want to quickly show you as well, if we click the title of one of these references again, this item that already has an attachment, from the View Reference screen, we can scroll down. There's a section called Attachments. We see the file that we've already attached here. We could delete it if we wanted to. If we hover over its name, we can delete it. We can attach additional files. If we click Attach Files here, we'll go ahead and click Browse once more. Maybe this time we'll go ahead and attach this PowerPoint presentation. We can go ahead and choose Open. Of course, it has to be uploaded again. All right, so that's now part of this particular reference, and I can access it on any other computer where I can, access my EndNote online account via a web browser. So that can be really handy. And, with the free EndNote Basic account, you can store up to 50,000 references and up to 2 gigabytes worth of file attachments in your EndNote online library. If you also have access to the Web of Science and you've enhanced your EndNote online account with the Web of Science access, you have additional functionality, but you still have the same limits of up to 50,000 references and up to 2 gigabytes worth of file attachment storage. It's when you link an EndNote desktop license to your EndNote online account by setting up sync in EndNote desktop. When you get further enhancement in EndNote online, and for a 2-year period of enhancement, you'll have virtually unlimited storage in EndNote Online. You can store 5 less than 1 million references in EndNote Online, and you can store an unlimited number of file attachments. So again, if you have EndNote desktop access, the next thing I'm about to show you won't really come into play as very often, but if you have either a basic account or a Web of Science enhanced EndNote Online account, and you're sort of getting near your 2 gigabyte file attachment storage limit, and you wanted to perhaps free up some space for additional literature, you can hover your mouse over Organize. You have a screen here, or a little command called Manage Attachments we'll click on. This page will show you all of the attachments in your EndNote library, your EndNote online library. You could sort this list by different details, but I would usually recommend file size largest to smallest is usually the most beneficial sort option, because again, normally if you're coming here, it's most likely to, I mean, you can review the items that are already linked, but it might be to come here and remove some items. So again, you can attach additional literature while staying below your 2 GB storage limit. You'll see a use space statistic letting you know how much space is used. My account is linked to EndNote 20 currently, which means I have that 2-year enhancement period where I have unlimited storage space. If you choose to delete items from your EndNote online library for any reason, I would recommend downloading them again first, just to ensure you have a backup, just in case. So if you, let's say this first item, let's say this was 717 megabytes and I was working with that 2 GB limit and I wanted to delete it. I would click on the name of the PDF first, I would recommend, so that we save the file as a backup to our hard drive. Once that's downloaded, we can go ahead and mark the items, whichever items it is that we want to remove, and then whenever we're ready, we can go ahead and delete those attachments. This won't delete the reference that we see it associated with, but it will take the attachment out of that reference completely. It's not going to go to the trash. The attachment is completely deleted, which is why I recommend backing it up first, just in case. So I'm just going to go ahead and, just as an example, click delete attachments here, and we'll see that that comes off the list. Perfect. All right, so we're at a point now where we're ready to start working with the Cite While You Write add-in in Microsoft Word. Really, it comes down to personal preference. We might have some users who prefer to build their web library first, or their EndNote library first, and then go about citing references in a research project using Microsoft Word. Other researchers might choose to add references on the fly as they plan to cite them in their body of text. So it really comes down to personal preference. In EndNote Online, if you if you click on Downloads, this is where you can install the standalone Cite While You Write tools for Microsoft Word. Now, I want to mention, again, if you also have access to EndNote Desktop, and you want to use EndNote Online in Word as well, you don't want to install these standalone tools, because your EndNote Desktop add-in already includes the online tools as well, and I'll show you in a moment how you can swap between both sets of tools. But again, if you're strictly an EndNote Online user and you want to load Cite While You Write for Microsoft Word on Windows or Mac OS, you can click the options here. This MSI option is more intended for administrators who might be deploying the add-in on multiple workstations all at once. So usually if you're a standalone user, it's just the first item or the third item, depending on your platform. Now, this takes a couple minutes to install. I've already installed it ahead of time, but I did just want to point out again, it's under Downloads where you would access the standalone installer. I'm going to go ahead and open a real basic Word document that I've got on my desktop here, just to sort of mimic the start of a body of text. And this is just coming up perfect. So we see, when you install the Cite While You Write add-in for Microsoft Word, the next time you launch Word, on the ribbon, which is what Microsoft calls a series of tabs that run across the top of the document window, you'll have an EndNote tab, or if you're an EndNote Desktop user, it may say something like EndNote 20. The fact that it just says EndNote means that these are the online commands. So anything we're doing with Cite While You Write will be linked up with EndNote Online, which is why we're being asked to log in here, because Cite While You Write is trying to access an EndNote Online library to look for references to cite. And like I was mentioning, when you set up your account, if you choose to link it with Facebook or LinkedIn, that's fine. It helps logging in from the web. But come this step in Word, you would have to input that associated email address and password that you're also defining when you register your account. So I just wanted to reiterate that. I'm going to go ahead and just quickly input our credentials here, and hope I remember that password. I believe that's it. Go and log in. All right, so it's just taking a moment to, it's getting the list of styles that are available for my EndNote Online account, and that'll, again, vary depending on your level of access. Perfect. It looks like it's just finished. Before we cite anything, I just want to point out, if you go to Preferences on the EndNote tab and you visit the Application tab, this is where you can toggle back and forth between the EndNote Desktop Cite While You Write add-in for Word or the EndNote Online add-in for Microsoft Word. So again, it was already configured to EndNote Online, and again, that's why we're seeing the tab that just says EndNote on the ribbon. But if I was working between EndNote Online and EndNote 20, I can click the EndNote option under Application, and if we press OK here, we see that it now says EndNote 20 instead. I did want to mention on Mac OS, I believe you have to quit Word and reopen it to get the tab name to to update or display the new name, but it's dynamic here on Microsoft Windows. But again, we're focusing on EndNote Online, so I'm going to go ahead and switch that back. I just wanted to show anyone who might have access to both EndNote Desktop and EndNote Online how you can swap back and forth by going to Preferences, Application, and choosing the appropriate part of the platform you want to cite from. We're going to set it back to EndNote Online. Click OK. And whenever you want to cite a reference using the EndNote Online add-in for Microsoft Word, you would want to first position your cursor where you would like to create that in-text citation. So again, we'll have a real basic body of text here, just mimicking the start of a research project. And let's pretend this first sentence is something we need to add a citation for. We've got our cursor flashing at the end of that citation. We can now click on Insert Citations, which will bring up a search window here. The first time you access this window, it may be blank. After you've performed at least one search, it'll populate automatically the search parameter from your previous search to potentially save time. But if you want to search for a different term, you would just clear the search field. We could type in a different term or a phrase, any bit of information that would be found in our EndNote Online library. We can click Find here. We see the author, year, title information for any matching references in our EndNote Online library. We can click on any one of the entries. If we might have ambiguous matches and maybe we can't tell precisely which of the items it is just based simply on author, year, and title, you can look at all of the underlying information here at the bottom of this window to see all of the details in the EndNote Online library entry. And if we find an entry that, a reference that looks like one we want to cite, we can either double click on it here or we can single click and press Insert either way, and I'll go and use the Insert button. Now there's a feature called instant formatting that's part of Cite While You Write. It's turned on by default, and that's what we see just took place, is that as we add a citation, the idea behind Cite While You Write is that you're formatting your references as you develop your body of text, which makes it easier to spot potential issues, which our product support team would be happy to assist with. I've got a word setting called field shading turned on, which is why you're seeing gray shade over the citation that EndNote has just generated for us and the start of the bibliography at the end of the text. Again, that's something you might not see by default, but it's something you can turn on through Word's preferences. Again, it's called field shading, and I currently have it set to always. And that's just letting us know where in a Word document there's what's called hidden field codes, which is sort of like a low-level programming language that Word provides. The codes are normally hidden, but I'm going to press a keyboard shortcut that reveals them temporarily. So here we see there's all of this underlying information that's behind the formatted in-text citation and the bibliography, and EndNote is using these details to, to understand, all of the metadata for a reference so that you can sort of send a formatted document between EndNote authors, and EndNote can continue formatting the information based on what we call the traveling library. The field codes also include information about the output style that you're using to format with, and that really dictates how EndNote will be formatting the document. Right now, we've got our default style annotated selected. And if we click the drop down here, we see that that's our only favorited style currently, but we can choose select another style. That's going to bring up our full list of styles available in EndNote Online. And again, the number of styles will differ or vary depending on your level of access. You can also mark, like we had marked favorited connections, you can also favorite styles as well in EndNote Online so that you can sort of end up with a much more manageable list if you typically only format with maybe a handful of styles. But quickly, let's go ahead and, annotated is sort of a generic author date format that would include abstract information if available in the bibliography. This one reference doesn't have one just yet. But let's go and reformat with a numbered style here just to show you. I'm going to scroll down. I believe there's a style available to me called Vancouver, which is an example of a numbered style. A lot of these are probably numbered output styles, but let's go and select Vancouver. Oop, right there. Click OK. Perfect. And so as it's reformatting, EndNote's just sort of taking stock of whatever's cited in the text. All right, that just finished, and just by simply changing that style dropdown, we can influence any of the formatted in-text citations and the bibliography that EndNote's generating for us. I did want to point out your bibliography is initially at the very end of your body of text, but if maybe you have an appendix or something that needs to be below the bibliography, At any point after citing even just one reference, you can highlight your EndNote generated bibliography and you can cut and paste it elsewhere in the text, and EndNote will continue to update the bibliography in that new location. I'm going to leave mine as is just in this real basic document, but I did want to confirm you can reposition your bibliography simply by cutting and pasting it. Let's pretend we want to add another citation. We'll go ahead and reposition our cursor at the end of this second sample sentence. We can go ahead and press the Insert Citations again. This time, let's try to cite something from that shared REM sleep group. I'm just going to input the term sleep. This shouldn't be found in any of my own references, I don't believe, just in that, that shared group. And if we go and find that, it'd take a moment. Perfect. Because we had marked, it looks like actually some of these are in some of the asthma-related references, which is fine. But because we had marked that under others groups used for Cite While You Write, we are also seeing that some of these are coming from that shared group as well. And so we would be able to, again, work down this list of matching search results. If we find a match that we want to insert, we can highlight it here, press Insert. Right where our cursor is flashing, we would see that citation appear. Perfect, and we see that the bibliography updates dynamically as well. Now, let's say, like I was mentioning, let's say in some instances you need to customize the appearance of an in-text citation. That's something you usually need to do for numbered styles. Usually that's something you might have to do for author date citations. So let's go and let's reformat once more. We'll click the Style dropdown, choose Select Another Style. And then once this list comes up, I think we'll go ahead and reformat temporarily with the APA 7th guidelines. I'm just going to type a couple of letters here. Instead of scrolling, it's just jump me down closer to position. Here's APA 7th. We can click on OK. EndNote once more. We'll take stock of what's been cited in the text, sort of look at the style settings, see how the citation should format, how the bibliography should appear, and we see that EndNote has applied those changes dynamically. Now, in some instances, especially with the APA guidelines, I believe that if you mention an author's surname in the preceding sentence, that might be an instance where you're asked to exclude the author information from the citation as not to duplicate it. You wouldn't, to achieve that, you wouldn't want to just delete what you see here, because doing so doesn't update those hidden codes. And if your document gets formatted again by clicking Update Citations and Bibliography, or if you just insert another citation, which will trigger the reformatting action, I'll do that now, we see that the manual change gets lost because that manual change, again, hasn't updated the underlying code to tell EndNote to not include the author information for that citation. The appropriate method for customizing an individual citation in a permanent manner would be to highlight that citation with your mouse. From there, you can then click on Edit Citations. This window is going to show you each formatted citation in your text. Whichever citation you've highlighted ahead of time will be in focus automatically. And from this screen, on the bottom half under Edit Citation, we can do things like exclude the author, like I mentioned. We could exclude the year instead. We could exclude both, perhaps, and just have cited page information for our reader, maybe. Or, you know, maybe we had a secondary source that we're not citing directly from, but we want to include it in our reference list to inform our reader that we had consulted that work during our research. That might be an instance where you suppress both the author and year in a author date citation and just have the reference in the bibliography. So from here, again, in our example, I'm just going to go ahead and leave exclude author check. But we can also do things like add a plain text prefix, like the phrase see also, let's say. And if we have a style set up to use cited pages, like APA 7th, we can actually type a page number or a range of pages here in the pages field. And if we click OK, we see all of those changes take effect once the formatting process finishes. And if we've cited that reference more than once in the text, each citation, each instance of the citation can be customized in a different manner. And again, we're seeing all of the citation customizations take effect. I did just want to quickly point out, not every style is set to use that pages field. So if we return to edit citations, or actually, excuse me, let's go ahead and reformat with a different style that's not set to use that pages field, like annotated. We see we reformat, and even though we have pages field information, it will not be displayed here because, again, that style is not set up to use cited pages. If you're working with EndNote Desktop, you could customize the style to include cited pages, but for EndNote Online, if you need to sort of force page information to appear for a particular style, you can highlight the citation in question, return to edit citations, But instead of using the pages field, what you would need to do is input the information into the suffix field. And if it's, whether it be a single page number or a range of pages, if you utilize the suffix solution, you have to include the appropriate page prefix manually as to where, for styles that are set up to use cited pages, these details the page prefix would come in automatically. So again, we're formatting with annotated, which isn't set up to use pages, but we can still get our cited page information to appear sort of in a brute force manner by inputting it into suffix and then clicking OK. Once this reformats, we'll see that change take effect. Perfect, there we go, it's now back. The last item, and it looks like we're just at time, the last item I wanted to show quickly is how to appropriately remove a citation. Again, you wouldn't want to just delete what you see, because if you leave any of that hidden code, excuse me, let me put that back. If you leave any of that hidden code, the citation may just reappear or lead to formatting errors down the line. So again, if you need to remove a citation for whatever reason, let's do the second citation here. We'll highlight the citation with our mouse. We'll now go to Edit Citations. The second citation is in focus because we selected it first by highlighting it. We can now click the little arrow next to this entry, and on this menu, we see an option to remove citation. We can choose that. It comes off this window. If we click OK, it comes out of the text where we had selected the citation, and if that was the only instance of that citation, that reference in our body of text, it would come out of the bibliography as well, as we see that just took place here.